I'm live?
Yeah.
We're going? Awesome. I'll take your word for it. And if I end up talking to myself for about 5 minutes, more than I'm going to be talking to myself throughout this entire stream, that's entirely on you, and I blame you for everything. Hi everyone who's waiting. Welcome to We Show. This is just going to be kind of a little bit of a gameplay chat between you and I. You know, we're going to have a deep, intimate rundown of all the mechanics, and we're going to go over questions from chat. So if you're watching in YouTube chat, feel free to throw things my way, and I will get to them when I feel like getting to them. And I'm going to take my sunglasses off because they make it really difficult to look at chat. So how's everyone doing? Are we having a good time? Are you enjoying the campaign so far? You've been looking through the rulebook and coming up with a bunch of really great and insightful questions for me to go over, I'm sure. Because if you haven't, then this is going to be a very tough stream for me to handle. Yeah, so we're going to start off. The daily unlocks just went out about an hour ago, and as I'm sure a bunch of you have noticed and have been fanboying over, Decoy 5 got revealed, one of our chroniclers in the Operatives expansion, and I'm going to go over his kit on stream for you all. I managed to forget to get his mini before we went on stream, but I will show off his dashboard along with all of his items and potentials, and Andy is going to tell me that none of that is going off screen. Amazing. It's perfect, it's amazing, and the mini has just arrived. Ta-da! Now I'm off screen. Okay. We're moving everything a little bit down. There we go. That's perfect. You guys aren't going to complain about any of that. So Decoy 5, yeah, obviously super iconic character. Everyone loves Decoy. He's the coolest guy ever. He's been in like every single adventure we've had in the RPG. So he was a supernatural choice to bring back for the Operative expansion, and we're super excited because the mechanics that he gets are so cool. So Decoy 5 is a super advanced sniper. You know, he's an assassin character, and Renar really represented that super well by giving him like a really nice kit to give him the ability to kind of slip in and out of combat. But the critical aspect of Decoy 5, which I realize I've left briefly off screen, is Ico. Decoy 5 has a drone that is his companion, and we've represented that in game with a little extra unit that he gets to control. So sound is looking a little bit low. I can just talk a bit louder if you want to. We're going to push that up a little bit. So yeah, let's go through it. I guess the most important thing about Decoy is Ico. It's kind of one of his unique mechanics. So at the beginning of every mission, whenever Decoy spawns, Ico spawns with him. And whenever Decoy is taking an action, Ico gets to also move around. And there's a couple of various ways to use Ico. I think there's two main ways that you can use Ico. So one is when we're in focus. Let me just make sure. Yeah. So focus, we have curveball. Basically, Decoy can ignore high elevations when accounting for line of sight. We're looking at the mic, and I know it's delayed, so I don't want to just sort of pause the entire thing. But we can try and shove it a little bit higher. I'm just going to kind of yap for a little while, and if you guys are hearing me a little bit better, we can push it up. Let's see. I'm gonna kind of assume that things are fine, because otherwise I'll be stuck here for a long time. Yeah, curveball. Basically, whenever Ico is placed on a tile, the elevation of that tile is ignored, and that means that Decoy can effectively shoot over hills. So to put an example together on our board, say Decoy is here and is shooting at a target which is here. Normally, this tile here would be an obstacle because you cannot draw a line over it. But with Ico sitting on that tile and using curveball, is it out of frame?
Off frame, yeah.
Let's push it a little bit backwards. I will make this work.
That's cool, fine. You can do whatever you want.
Awesome. Yeah, so with Ico here, this effectively acts as kind of an off-site targeting spot for Decoy. And so by using curveball, which is his focus active ability, he can make this shot and take out the cackler. The other main thing that Ico can do is on the focus side, or the primal side, one of his passive traits allows him to leave a tile that Ico's in without being sucker punched. And that basically means that if, Decoy has been ganged up on, is having a rough time, has a bunch of people trying to murk him, but he has best friend Ico, normally he would be completely stuck here basically, because if he tries to leave this tile, he's going to immediately trigger sucker punches from all of these units and is going to be absolutely... Thank you about the nail polish. It's because I bite my nails a bunch and I don't want to do that anymore. If he was trying to leave this tile normally, he wouldn't be able to because, well, he would be able to, but he'd probably get a little bit fucked up. And with Ico there, it means that he can leave the tile without triggering the sucker punches. So Ico's a big part of his kit, and it's kind of like the main event. And it was really fun to kind of, Renard did a great job of putting that in, of having like a little companion. Whenever Decoy moves, Ico also gets to move around, and as with coordinated move, Decoy actually gets to displace, which is a more sort of powerful version of moving. So when you're moving, you have to account for things like hard terrain and elevation. So as an example, for moving from this tile to this tile, this would take up Decoy's entire movement, because when you're moving up, it causes you to reduce your movement by 1, and then moving into hard terrain also reduces your movement by 1. But as an example, Decoy's here. With coordinated move, Decoy can just hop up the cliff because displace ignores elevation. So this is kind of like getting him into position for like sniping, like it's kind of, he's choosing his targeting spots. He uses Ico to either get himself out of trouble and like relocate, or he can use Ico as a way of blocking or of ignoring obstacles and firing at things that think that they're safe, but they're not. And that's kind of like the sort of the base level of Decoy. But of course, there's a few more like synergies and so on. So his equipment, I think, is super cool. The sniper rifle, the thing about Decoy, so this focus pool, it means that there's very low chances for Decoy to botch, but because he has so many dice, he's still going to get high values. For white die, there's a pretty high potential for damage there, but he's not likely to botch. And then the sniper rifle, the range is huge. He's got 7 range. He basically can see across the entire map. And as long as he stays out of trouble and doesn't deal with the sensitive condition, then he's fine. Of course, if it does flip, then he runs into a bit more trouble because he needs to take some time to repair it. Yes, goddamn Echo and Decoy together. Echo and Decoy together. I'll get into that a little bit later. Some other effects for him that I find interesting. I want to go over a couple of like synergies and so on. A question from Sildanafil. Can you displace a unit between tiles with impassable borders? Yes. So basically, when you displace, you can kind of basically pick up your unit and just go somewhere else. It represents kind of like scrambling up cliffs or scrambling down cliffs, or using some sort of like movement ability to get up and down them. So in this case, yeah, like this border would normally be impassable because this is elevation -1, this is 0, this is +1, or lower level and higher. And normally Decoy would have to go all the way around. It would take a while. With coordinated move, which gives him displace 1, he can just hop right up and relocate. Is it only certain icons, certain tags on items that can be swapped? So the thing about items is sometimes they have a cult tag, and sometimes they are not affiliated to a cult. So for example, the shutter suit would only be able to be given to another chronicler. So, I mean, you could get really funky and give this to Echo. But the sniper rifle could be traded around, and for example, other weapons that aren't associated to a cult.
Your hand seems to be out because focusing on.
Oh, my hand is causing the focus to go off. Okay, I will take my hand away.
You can point it at this.
I can point, but not leave it there. Oh, I see it now on the playback. Yeah, so you can do a lot of trading around with items and so on, but the cult limitation is one of the things that kind of balances that out, and it makes it interesting. If you find something that belongs to like no cult in particular, you can really get like, oh well, wait, who can we put this on to get to the greatest effect? And then similarly, if you find an item that does belong to a cult, first off, your immediate thought is, well, we need to give this to that member of the cult on our team. But if you haven't had access to that cult until now, it comes into, wait a minute, we're going to get access to this cult, or we need to think about getting access to that cult. Of course, there's no focus. The sheet is on primal. Get out of here. Get out of this chat room right now. Yeah, you better see yourself out. So I just wanted to also go into, I'll get back to some chat things, but I wanted to go into a couple of synergies that I really liked here. First off, the big one that I find really cool here is this combination with his shutter suit and his opticalizer mask. So the Fumer module on the shutter suit means that basically Decoy can, at effectively a moment's notice, completely surround himself with smoke, and that means that he is completely untargetable by anyone else. So in this case, you know, in this position, I'll move him here to make it a little bit easier on myself. So it obscures every tile within 1, which means that all of this will become obscured. And that means that first off, like there's now a giant blockade across the map. So for example, if maybe Decoy is kind of acting as a barrier to protect another unit as they try and get to cover and escape. But also, because of the opticalizer mask, Decoy can still shoot out of the cloud. So he's completely able to attack with impunity from in here. So he can still take a shot. And then, because of, I believe it's dead end, it is not. It is multiply. Because of this potential that Decoy starts with, he then goes into stealth, which is a state that he can be in where he then, because by definition, no unit has line of sight on him unless they were sharing the tile. He goes into stealth, and that means that he can no longer be targeted by the hostile until stealth is somehow broken. Stealth is one of the effects that's in the rulebook. It basically gives the operatives a way to kind of sneak around and set up things without being targeted by the hostiles' units. Can an obscured tile be the target of an area attack? Yes, because you target the tile and not what's in it. But if you can't draw line of sight to the tile, then if you, for example, were trying to get to one of the tiles back here, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be able to do so, but maybe I'm misremembering. The point is that yes, you can target obscure tiles for area attacks because it's the tile itself. If an operative dies, what happens to the items? It was answered already, but yeah, basically when an operative dies, their equipment drops on the tile and can then be picked up. And then you can represent that with some item tokens to mention that, except armor, because it's equipped and worn, it means that it stays on them. And once an operative dies, you do have the ability to basically retrieve their body, because an operative's body can be picked up like an item. It counts as 2 items, and then they can be rescued for if perhaps at some point there was a way to bring them back. Oh, you're so right. I should get a little pointer stick. That's such a good idea. That would be so smart. Alas, we do not. So yeah, that was a little rundown of Decoy. I find him super cool. He's one of the sort of sniper characters that is really interesting. We have a couple of like longer range characters along with some proper melee characters. And I think that with the combination with Ico, Decoy has like a pretty unique like gameplay style of this sort of being in 2 places at once, using Ico to set up situations and like sight lines. The sort of I love operatives that have a way of interacting with the map somehow, because it means that you really pay attention to everything that's going on here. The map then becomes a really important part of the game, because you're looking like what points are there for using these. At the moment, we don't have a way to represent that you're carrying a body. It would be a case of, maybe you put their dashboard underneath yours or something similar. We tried to keep as many tokens out of the game as we could, because we find them a bit of a struggle in terms of lobbying them around and so on. So we didn't want to add a bunch of tokens for every edge case, but we'll see what happens. Let me open up my little rough script. Yeah, so Decoy, super cool. Ooh. So what happens when an operative dies and cannot be rescued? So there's a few situations of this. In some cases, I will mention one of the operatives that we introduced on the first day, so Thalberg, just as a case, and then we'll talk about a more general situation. Thalberg, one of his unlock condition effectively is that he joins the roster and joins the mission when an operative dies. That basically allows for the lore reason is that he's been assigned to the operative squadron as kind of a watchdog to be like, make sure they don't fuck this up too badly. And if someone goes down, he kind of is like, fine, I'll do this myself. So in that situation, so one operative has died, another one has joined in, the player would just take on the role of the new operative. Otherwise, yeah, it would be a case of the player has to effectively wait until the end of the mission and kind of play along with, still being part of the game. And then once the next mission begins, they choose another operative from the roster. We specifically, Renar is trolling. We don't like the reverse side of the item token for bodies is not actually a bad idea. I'll have a think about that. Hidden X means the model counts as plus X tiles away from the shooter. I don't believe it gets a straight plus X defense. It's against area attacks. So that's kind of representing, yes, you get defense plus or minus X against area attacks. That's kind of representing, you know, you're not able to be easily targeted as the target of whatever the area attack is. You know, like maybe a grenade explodes and you kind of duck for cover. It means that then it becomes a case of the hard terrain that's all over the map becomes quite a useful tool, both for it's a bit of a hassle to get in and out of because of the increased movement, but it means that you can think about, wait a minute, maybe there's an area attack that's being used by the enemy. Perhaps I could like hunker down in this area, and then I'll get a bonus for my defense. And yeah, I don't want to talk too much about this because I've done some cool things in content that I'm no longer allowed to talk about, legally speaking, and I don't want to slip up and reveal anything. But I've done some cool things with Hidden related to taking cover from explosives. I don't want to go too far into that. Yeah. Carrying an item it's 2 to 3 item slots. So it's kind of a case of like, do you want to try and get your buddy out because you might have, for example, picked up a potential that allows you to bring them back as a one-off. A little spoiler for y'all. Or do you kind of just eat the loss if you have more guys in the background? How long does Decoy's shutter suit smoke last? So the obscured effect lasts until the end of the current round. One of the things that we kind of really heavily tried to cut down on is effects that last more than one round, because that means that you can kind of like everything that's on the board, you know that it's going to effectively wipe at the end of a round. And you can kind of refresh things based on that, and you don't have to have, like, for example, trying to put timers on things or put clocks on things. So it lasts for effectively one round. And in terms of how often you can do it, it is once per mission, unless you find a way to flip this item back. So some items have no dedicated like flip condition. In which case it's basically at the end of each mission, they'll go back to being operational. Or you might be able to find items in the world that allow you to, let me see if I can find one in this big pile. Aha, I do have it. If you happen to get an E-cube scavenged from some wreck or something like that, then you would be able to use this to flip a discharged item back to being operational. And then you would flip this, and then it's also recharging. So basically, E-cubes are a way for the chroniclers and a few other technological operatives to recharge their gear. And it's one of the... It's sort of like, I think it's interesting to have because it gives you like a way of recharging your items. It means that if you find them, you can be like, wait a minute, here's an item that I can combo this with. And if someone else finds the item, it's kind of a case of like, let's get it over to this guy so that you can use it. So, E-cube busted. Let's see. Do you have a mechanic to switch from revealed to threat? So there's not a like core, like always available mechanic for the hostile to switch units back to being. I'm wondering if I had it here, but I don't. I'll say, and I don't want to give tons of stuff away, but one of the effects that swarm cards are able to use is exactly going back to being revealed to a threat. Does the visionary do it? I don't have my tarot memorized. which really reveals me as like a terrible, terrible gamer. Aha, yes, you're 100% correct. Also, the visionary, one of the effects of it is that you can revert a bunch of clanners back to the corresponding threats. One of the things that we wanted to always do with the tarot is that both parties will get use out of the tarot. So there's kind of no point in the visionary being reveal all threats, because then the hostile gets it and it's a case of, well, what the hell am I supposed to do with this unless I want to just sort of reveal a bunch of my own units. So they have like a corollary effect for the hostile, where, for example, they could play the tarot and then suddenly all of these units are back to being threats. Of course, there is an aspect of that. Wingnu, you do read things. Congratulations. There is an aspect of, well, the operatives now know what is all there, but it means that there's still the angle of they can't exactly track like what threat is what threat, because you might shuffle them around, and also they still will have to like reveal those threats in order to be able to target them. What concept am I? Yeah, I feel like the mediator, Marco's probably called it correctly. So from here, unless I get another question very quickly, I will talk a little bit about some of the things I find cool about the sort of the through lines that run through a lot of the mechanics in Degenesis. So one of the big things that we really went into the game with was flipping. So flipping it permeates pretty much the entire game. The big one, of course, is the flip between focus and primal. I'm probably, considering a bunch of you folk seem to be fairly up to speed, I don't need to talk about exactly what. A very good question coming in about tarot cards. Tarot cards can react to other tarot cards, and there's in fact a specific example. Sometimes, a lot of the time, it's a case of one isn't directly like negated or overwritten by the other. So a lot of the time it's not necessarily, it is a case of like they will kind of both resolve their effects simultaneously. And what I'll say is that we don't have like a direct stack of this tarot resolved for this tarot resolved for this tarot. It's kind of a situational thing. But I will find it in this little bundle. There is explicitly a tarot that allows you to negate other tarot. So if someone plays something and you don't want that happening, you can kind of like, almost like, you know, you're counterspelling it. And similarly, for example, some of the ones, the tarot cards that, some of the tarot cards that add things like botches to a roll. So for example, this adds 3 botches, then you might choose to, if this is like a super, super important roll, you pick up the Arcana that gives you secure 3, and it kind of negates that. Sometimes it specifies after roll. So the reason for this is that it's basically representing, yeah, it's specifying after roll to make sure that it affects like a roll that has previously happened. Otherwise, there's some specific situations of like, we don't want the tarot, sorry, I'm pondering. It's kind of just to clarify things and make sure that people know that this can be used on a roll that has already happened, right? It's to make sure that people are like, oh, I've rolled this. I really want this to succeed. I can use a tarot on the roll previously. And also to kind of specify timing. It's a case of like, you don't have to kind of run in and go like, okay, this roll is important, so before the roll, I'm going to add success plus 3, because then it might botch and you might have a really bad time from that. So yeah, it's just kind of to clarify timing on things in some cases. Let's see. Dirty fighting. Yeah, there's a few operatives. There's a few operatives and items that add dirty fighting. I don't really want to reveal too much of like operatives already, but Mildred, Mildred, I believe, has dirty fighting. And the protector, which gives +5 defense, I do believe it's before the roll. It's kind of a case of like you can't really use this to negate something that's happened, but let me go check. Yeah, so it's for the entire round, so you would kind of want to use that one to like prepare for an incident that you think is about to happen, you know? Like if someone is about to get absolutely murked, you can kind of, before the attack happens, you put it down and you can kind of save them. If so, what happens if all the operatives die? So there's a few situations of this. Failing a mission for the operatives is a pretty severe situation. The way that it kind of works is that the hostile just straight up completes their objectives, and the operatives, they complete whatever they manage before they die. And there's a few outcomes to this. So you can fail a mission by retreating from it, or you can fail a mission by dying, or the hostile completes a victory condition. If you, following the failure, you can still construct a roster. So you have some operatives left, and you still have a mission that you can go to. So for example, if you're on one of the side missions, one of the recruitment or consolidation missions, you could still progress forward because it's not like a mission critical thing. And some of the main missions still allow you to progress forward even if you failed, because it's a case of like in the narrative, there's another opportunity for you. But some missions are just like kind of critical, like the boss fight at the end of Act 1, which I won't talk too much about, but there is a boss fight at the end of Act 1. And if you die at that point, it's kind of just, yeah, that's game over. And you would restart the campaign and go from there with a new starting roster. Or you would reset back to the starting roster. So yeah, failure is something we wanted to be significant, dark, gritty, lethal, punishing. It's the core of the game. We wanted to make sure that it's a case of like you really feel like you've got to try and get through this. So I will go back to talking about flipping because I got distracted for a while. So focus and primal flipping, it's a huge part of the game. Having the different stat lines on both sides, having the different traits on both sides, it means that you really need to think about, do I want to be in focus or primal right now? What is most beneficial to me? But of course, we really wanted to kind of extend that mechanic all the way throughout. So that's why items have their botch face. And then you get a cool moment of, well, you know, maybe I need to flip something over and maybe I'm having a really bad time and then I can flip them back. Are you... Okay. So we can reveal the smiley face.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, cool. So items flipping, it was a really interesting, like aspect for us to really push. And it meant that we could really play around with like some items, for example, will automatically flip after you've used them, and that means that we can put some things in the back side of them. So I will bring an example up. For example, grenades. Yes, so Marco has handled the question about champions. There are 6 cockroach champions and 1 neutral champion in the core box, which is, I don't want to go too well. I guess you can see them all on the campaign page actually. So our champions are someone pulled the 6 and 1. Sheer coincidence, I assure you, 100%. So we have the spider, the ukai, and the broodmother, and then we have the kings. And you know, don't want to give away too much about a lot of those, but the kings are monstrous. It is huge, huge. So looking forward to that. Yeah, hand grenades. You can throw them. You can, you know, you lob them. They deal an area attack. It's kind of what you would expect for a hand grenade. But then there's a risk, because if you botch that roll, it now is going to attack your tile directly. And, well, you know, this is the kind of the equivalent of it drops on your tile, and if you're stacked up with a bunch of your allies and you drop a grenade, that's going to be a problem. And while I'm here, what I'll showcase is a little bit of the hostile, because there's a synergy that I really want to mention for people reading this one. Okay, yes, that is that one. Is it? Yes. Effectively, instead of wounding, the Snatcher can choose to flip one item that is on an enemy instead of wounding. So, if someone is holding a grenade and is stacked up with a bunch of their enemies, I will leave the rest to the further derivation is trivial, and we will be left for an exercise to the reader. So that was like some fun thing.
I think we're good.
You think we're good?
I restart. We're good in a second, and sorry for that, guys.
All good. Yeah, the stream just didn't want us to have fun. So, you know, go to your local alcove and complain to your friendly chronicler, and we will deal with that in time with strongly applied shocks. There was an example of brood call synergies. So brood call is one of the big things that we added for me being compared to Triglaw is generous. I should be Argyre because I've done nothing wrong ever. Brood call is one of the big ways for the hostile to kind of bring across this swarm effect of the cockroaches. So brood call, I will bring it up and I will let you take a look at the hostile screen from the back, looking behind the curtain. Try not to, you know, if you don't want to be spoiled, I'll get this off for a little while. But brood call is one of the big effects for the hostile to use. So whenever a swarmer takes an action, all of the feeders around them are able to also take a free action. And each feeder can only benefit from that once per round. So it's kind of like a, you know, choose your moment type thing. So as an example, I have a few threats on the board here. For your information, just to give you a little bit of a heads up, this is the setup for mission M3 following a rather large redesign during playtesting. So you might see this on some content coming up, who knows. So as an example, I have some threats here, and at some point I might decide I want to move a couple of these threats and start getting towards some of the enemy. And what I can do is I basically, as a threat, I can make this take a move action, move in, and then I can also make any of the feeders around also take move actions. And now these two, which I'll clue you in, guys, like a behind the scenes thing, these are feeders. They are no longer able to do that once again, because that's the limit of brood call. And that free action can be anything. It can be moving, it can be shooting, it could be attacking, it could be picking up items. It's just kind of like a way of the swarmers bringing some allies with them, and maybe if this is like the next round, they could maybe start ganging up on the other units. Each swarmer acts like a sergeant for feeders. That's quite a good analogy. Yeah. They kind of are like directing some of the grunts that are like, you know, running around between them. The swarmers make up the bulk of the cockroach force. So the feeders are kind of like almost like ads, you know, like they kind of like pile on, and they might also use the Legion rule for the cockroaches, which is that effectively the cockroaches can sacrifice themselves to amplify another cockroach's attack. So if I had a snatcher on this tile and I had a cackler on this tile, just as an example, and I'll remove the obscured tokens just to make sure this is actually possible in the rules. And I wanted to make this attack. So normally a cackler rolls 1 black and 2 white. And I might look at this and I could be, maybe this isn't quite what I need to get through. So the operative will tell me that Decoy 5 has defense 2, but then also has armor, so has defense 5. I look at this and I'm like, this is not going to make it. This is not going to happen. But what I can do is that I can remove this feeder and I could add, say, another black die to it. And now that means that I've sacrificed 1 feeder, but in exchange, I hit. I'm really glad that worked out, because that would have been a little bit embarrassing if I botched on a roll that I'm using for an example. And that would mean that then Decoy 5 would have to flip one of his potentials, and so on. And I think it's a kind of cool thematic idea of like it's almost like the Snatcher is kind of like jumping on Decoy and willingly taking a hit in order to set someone else up. And that's kind of one of the aspects that we wanted to bring in for the cockroaches, is this idea of like they are just a kind of like a swarming and completely expendable mass that you can kind of just throw at the operatives until something gets through. Because now that this Snatcher has died, well, I can just spawn another one in right away, or well, as an action, but right away, and suddenly it's back in, and it gets more brute call activations, and it can be used again to flip items or weapons or so on. So hidden threats that are actually traps don't get moved around with the swarm, correct. So traps are immobile, they can't be moved, but decoys are immobile and they do behave like feeders. So that means that, for example, I could have a decoy, I'll reveal this one to you guys, it's a secret between us, this is a decoy. If I had this feeder stack here and I moved a swarmer that was here, all of these could move. And then maybe also I want to like get really, really tricksy and I say, I'm only gonna move these 2. And then suddenly, okay, this is clearly a trap, right? But actually, it's a cackler, and that's like more of the mind games that the cockroach can sacrifice himself to add a die, even if he is the one to initiate it. No, that is not intended gameplay. You can't fully suicide attack because it's before one of your attacks. The cockroach has to be removed, so before your attack, you remove yourself, you no longer get the attack, right? It's very much a case of the cockroaches are like ganging up and stacking up. You want to see the hostile board for the other clans? That would be pretty neat, wouldn't it? But not in the scope of today's stream for reasons. From here, I'm gonna talk a little bit. We've got like a 2. Okay, tough question, and I know you can't answer fully, so feel free to ignore this. Cockroaches have distinct categories: feeders, swarmers, warriors, that reflect their horde mechanics. With supposed other clans expansions, did you have the chance to explore different mechanics? Fewer but stronger units, for example. I will feel free to ignore this, thank you. So, I would like to talk a little bit about synergies between operatives, with one particular example that I think it's very obvious, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a hint at what's to come further on down the line. So Gascoigne and Echo are 2 operatives that we've talked about quite a little bit. we've got Echo, and I will open up Gascoigne's sleeve and put him on. So, I'm not being mean, I'm just not allowed to talk about anything other than the core box, so I won't. So, Echo and Gascoigne, two operatives that you can get quite early on. They're relatively synergized just kind of right off the bat. You know, they're quite technological. You kind of see that they kind of would work together. But I wanted to point out a couple of different things. So first off, in terms of combat, Echo's combat presence is very much a case of like giving support to all of the people around him. So he starts with a lot of items that he can't actually kill anything on his own right off the bat because he has to, because chroniclers in the lore of Degenesis are all quote unquote pacifists. They're not officially allowed to carry lethal weaponry. So he starts with a vocoder and a streamer glove as his weapons. I'm not gonna pull out every single item and bit of equipment for this example, just because I want to focus on the big stuff. So because of this, these are both stun weapons, which means the Echo can't kill anyone at the start. But one of the effects that stun has is that it reduces the defense of any of the power of the pinky. Very true. It reduces the defense of any target. So, for example, maybe as an example, Gascoigne's going up against a Vanguard. Vanguards have 5 defense. They're pretty beefy. So Echo might want to kind of set Gascoigne up for the kill by jumping in and using his vocoder. And he can use his vocoder. He gets some bonuses from his potentials. I don't really want to go into the super huge detail, but if he stuns the Vanguard, that Vanguard now has 3 defense and can't take any actions for the rest of the round, because that's the effect of stun, and that means that it's a much easier kill for Gascoigne. A lot of Echo's kit synergizes in that sort of way of like, Echo can't really kill them himself, but he can really effectively set things up. One of the I don't know, I think this might have made it into We Play. One of the tactics that I tried got stopped by Echo stunning a warrior that was about to kill Gascoigne and waiting until I had to just sort of watch as Gascoigne kind of lined up the shot on my warrior and took him out. But another really fun way that they synergize, so a lot of Echo's kit revolves around information gathering. Of course, there's his ability to gather one intel freely, so he just kind of chooses one of the intel at the start and is like, yep, yoink, that's mine. But also, he has huge bonuses to scouting. He, because of his long range radar and his optical skills and so on, he's able to kind of peer across the battlefield and pick up where the enemies actually are and thus reveal their threats. But Echo's rather squishy. He's not super beefy. He doesn't really like to be out in front of people, and even with his scouting bonuses, which help him scout from further away, it can be a case of like he really wants to try and get up close. But conveniently, one of Gascoigne's items, the short-range radio, lets Gascoigne be used as the position for a scouting to start. So, for example, we have Echo back here and Gascoigne up here. Well, this would be probably doable for Echo to scout, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, that's doable for Echo to scout. He'll manage. But maybe if there's a few units on the tile, basically whenever you scout something, your excess of the range is extra units that you can reveal. So maybe that's a bit much, but because of the short range radio, this turns into just 2 tiles, and that's incredibly easy to do for Echo. He ends up revealing all 3, and boom, now Gascoigne can shoot at those on his turn. I wanted to bring that up to highlight the sort of combinations that the operatives can have. There's like the obvious combinations, then there's maybe a little bit of a deeper layer as well. And that's one of the things that I think is going to be really exciting for players to discover as they go through the game. And a lot of it also can come in through potentials as well. So I picked out a few of my favorites to sort of show off the idea of cooperative play between operatives that comes in through potentials. So I have a couple of these that I thought were just really cool that I want to show off a little bit, and I have a couple of these that I thought were useful as showing off the synergies. And because I'm completely selfish and this is my stream and no one can stop me, I'm going to just sort of go through some of those. So as an example, one of the Jahamadan potentials, you can forego an action in order to give... Wait, let me read it again. Yeah, so you forego one of your actions, you go earlier, and it means that one of your allies is buffed on their turn. And that might be a case of like you kind of set something up, like you may be Jahamadan's mentioned correct. Our core box Jahamadan has the ability to kind of move people around using his ram staff. And what that means is it might be a case of like you kind of push someone into one of your allies' tiles, you give that person another action on their turn, and then they use that to blitz them down. I'll answer quickly because we're talking about potentials. When operatives are told to draw potentials, they select them themselves from the deck. It's not random. You basically go to the deck, you look through, and you pick what you want. So you can kind of actually structure your builds, and you can decide what fits with what you guys are, like what your play style is like. Maybe there's a potential that really fits the way that you've been playing an operative. For example, maybe you actually don't want to set up your allies as a Jahamadan. Maybe you are kind of trying to bulk yourself up. So this one works for both. So Aviv, our core box Jahamadan, he has the icon, which is it's like a religious item, and something it does is it gives extra defense to whoever's carrying it. There's 2 ways that you could use this. So you could give it to an ally and you could buff them, and you could kind of keep them all stacked up by flipping the icon back whenever it goes inactive, and you can make sure that they're like super strong. They go into the fight while you're kind of like maneuvering enemies around, you're trying to set them up for victory. But you can carry the icon yourself and take this, and maybe somewhere along the line you find a weapon that I could have sworn that it was in the rulebook, but if it's not, then I'll make sure to put that in there, because yeah, that's a big deal. Yes, so you could, for example, use this on yourself. I'll check this after the stream, so don't worry about it. But yeah, the intent is that potentials are selected like specifically. You go look through the deck, you pick what you want, and then you can you can really build up your character. Oh my god, Jesus Christ. 3 supports buffing Steel Beam sounds like a properly hellish thing for the hostile. To be fair, one thing about Steel Beam, he's super strong, but also because of his big boy, he's actually weaker to area attacks. So with specific builds and so on for the hostile, it could be a little bit of a... There's things that can bring him down. let's see. I'm deciding whether I want to go on with gushing about my potentials or answering this question. How much room does the GM player have to play the game themselves? Is every action prescribed by the mission rules for them, or does the GM do what they like as long as they work towards their goals? Pretty much, yeah, unlimited room. There's very little prescription in the mission rules of like what's going on in terms of like what the hostile can do. The hostile is basically playing the same game with a slightly different rule set, right? They have different units, but they're using all the same things. There's no like specifically you must do this or do that. What the hostile does have is some objectives of their own. So I'll give an example from the mission that this is set up to represent, even though it's kind of a bastardized version at the moment. In this mission, the hostile's objective here is a sacrifice, like a message fire, a signal pyre. That's the word I use. And the hostile is trying to keep this lit because they're trying to send a message back to their main army. So at the beginning of every round, this becomes obscured, and the hostiles are trying to come up here and extinguish it. So the hostile is trying to keep this alight. And that's the objective that they're trying to complete. But the way that they go about that is very much up to them. You know, for example, they might try and like be super aggressive and try and meet the operatives all over here because this is obscured and they can't shoot whatever is up here. They can't even see it. They might try and build like a big huddle around it and try and like really wait out. And try and wait out the attack because this has like a time limit for when the message is fully sent. And there's a side objective in this mission to deal trauma damage, and the hostile might just say, "Look, you know, I'll keep this going, but I actually kind of just want to properly take out one of these guys and just kind of wait for them to overextend. Maybe they get up here, maybe they're like here, and then you kind of just clump in and try and take one out." Because for the hostile, like taking out an operative is a huge win, even if they don't complete the objective right away. So yeah, I would say that the hostile has a lot of room to play the game. The things that they don't get to do compared to the operatives is basically just choose which mission is going to be next when there's options. But once they're in the game, they have a lot of leeway in terms of what's available for them, what strategies they can execute, what tactics they can do, and how they want to try and complete the mission. Yeah, the potentials thing, I'll make sure that that's clarified because it is a big deal that you can pick all of your potentials. So I'll give it another read through and make sure that it's coming across okay. And thank you for flagging that up. I will get back to talking about some cool potentials because one thing that I really like. Another thing when we were talking about the icon, another example of the icon being something that you can use to buff yourself or an ally. Whereas if you take this and then you took the one that the icon's carrier can't be sucker punched, you would suddenly have like a huge kit that means that you kind of have a lot of impunity on the map because you can kind of jump in and out of the enemy tiles, and if you have a lethal weapon, you can go wild. And that's kind of some of the builds that we really wanted to go with. And some of the other Jahamadan potentials are built very much for the opposite, for going in on buffing your allies and trying to make them as strong as they can be. Something that I really like, we haven't revealed too much about the Anubians yet. They've not really shown up in any of the gameplay because they're the Anubian in the core box Yule is a relatively late game unlock, but they get some really cool stuff too. So this potential, for example, it really incentivizes you to go first, and it really incentivizes you to cooperate with the rest of your team. You know, you really get to be like, hey guys, let's really go in for this. Like, let's all coordinate. Maybe there's a champion that you really want to go all out. you set up, you like get all in a position where you can really wail on them, and suddenly it's like, okay, I'm gonna go first. You all follow me in. We're gonna take the champion out in like one round. Um, but it requires that sort of cooperation between operatives to really like communicate between each other or cooperate between each other and just properly go in for it. Can we see some Scourger potentials? You know what? Give me a few. I'm gonna dig through and I'll see if I can find one cool. In fact, if you give me one potential from the Scourgers in the game, all of the potentials in Clan Wars are refactored versions of what you see in Degenesis. Not all of them have made it in, so just in terms of like balancing the number of potentials with the number of operatives, we don't have the full list. But if you give me one Scourger potential, I will see whether we have it and whether I can tell you what it is, because there's a lot of cool things here. While Mikami goes through the Scourger potentials, I will show off one last one that I really like, which is Oathspeaker. I love this one because it means that you can both rely on your allies to do it. If you jump into a sorry, I'm reading and looking through what potentials we have. I do have Wild Dog Run. I will show it. So this, for example, means that you can really take it on yourself and you can be the one to jump in and kill the last enemy on your tile, but your ally can also kind of help you out and like snipe the enemy, and then because of your potential, then your team gets a bonus to what's around them. I will show off Wild Dog Run because it was asked for. I really like this one actually. I think it's really cool. So basically, the idea of this is that whenever an enemy leaves your tile, you get the sucker punch, and then you also get to displace one, and that means you can kind of chase after them, or you can use it for your own mobility. Like for example, if you were down here and an enemy tried to escape, you could displace up the hill and then get into a more advantageous position. And of course, flip a potential to a flesh wound, of course. So all of the potentials have. Wait, is that a response to potentials with a big drawback, or is it just let's show off some of the backsides? Because the backsides of potentials are all extremely fun and cool, and I really like the quotes on them. They all give you a little bit of a yeah, I see what you mean about Kavera. There's I don't want to talk too much about it, but there's an even more like specific Kavera callback. Well, it's not callback, it's not even like relevant. I just happen to know Rainbow Six Siege. Keep an eye out for some more of the operatives to be unveiled. You'll have a good time. Yeah, I love this. It's so cool. It's a really visual way for the hostile to keep an eye on what's going on around them. And also it means that the operatives get this big sense of like their life ticking down as the more and more of their board turns red. And then there's a huge moment if they get healed where they start pulling them back and they start getting those bonuses again. Super cool. And the voice lines are just really fun. We had a lot of fun writing them. It went really well. Could someone use these potentials for Degenesis too? I mean, maybe. I mean, the system's completely different, but like you could probably try and put it back. I won't because I'm busy with Clan Wars. I mean, it would be cool. Like I said, all of the potentials here are versions of the potentials from the original Degenesis. So there's a lot of links that you can draw. One of the first things that we did was like, okay, what does this potential do in Genesis, and is there a cool way to show that in like this new situation? And something that I've had from some of my playtesters who had played the RPG before is that they really liked how some of the like the big iconic potentials showed up in the board game with like a new face, you know. The same with a lot of the items. A lot of the items are things that you'll recognize, and they are now kind of recast in this really cool way. Could I get this thrown up big, because Spitalian lovers in chat are gonna want to see.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Sorry.
I thought I was talking. I thought it was going to be like a big cool thing where I like slide it onto the table and all the Spitalians in chat are like, "Oh my god, wow, splaying, it's back."
Till this moment, everything was perfect. You know?
Until that moment, everything was completely perfect. So, what operative uses the most red dice? That's a good question. I don't know it off the top, but you know what? I will find the information for you. I will look on our big spreadsheet. The most red dice. So a lot of operatives use one red die. No operative has multiple. The biggest, I think, disparity. Yule has four white dice on his focus, and one red or one fatal on his primal. I think that's the biggest like switch. Of course, there's it's kind of hard to say like a definitive number. I think probably like one fatal die is still quite a lot. I mean, it can chew through a lot of the enemies if it rolls high, and combined with some other bonuses, if you can secure it, there's plenty of options. Will the evil DM have the chance to own the players and make them suffer with a Psychonaut? I will say we have revealed the entirety of the core box at this point. If you don't see a Psychonaut now, you're not going to see one. We did think about it, but it ended up being kind of more of a to fit with like the narrative of the game. Like the clan wars are very much like a human conflict, and bringing in this sort of extra angle, sort of shoving in a Psychonaut out of nowhere. It would have been super cool. I know Renard would have turned out some absolutely demented mechanics for a Psychonaut, but they are not part of the scope of the clan wars. So, you know, maybe I think you're right. I think Steelbeam with Kingsblade is huge on the fatal pool. I mean, if you know, who knows what'll happen if the campaign is a wild success. We'll see what happens in future. That said, I think there's still going to be some really cool moments even without Psychonauts. As you'll be aware, Marco would have stopped it because canon, completely true. We do have an Amsumo in the cast, and I won't talk too much about the Amsumo just because it's a little bit of a reveal and it's a big moment when you get up to it. What I will say is that this Amsumo is monstrous. It is a beast. It will probably kill a lot of people. And you'll find out how in the campaign. I wanted to talk a little bit about some fun items. So something that is, of course, actually this is a good segue from the Psychonaut talk. Something that's very iconic in Degenesis is Burn. And Burn in this game is very fun because it is a very, very powerful item. I'm only going to show off one and leave the rest to be revealed at a later date, or when you can track it down somewhere. Burn gives huge bonuses. It is very, very powerful, but you'll notice that it has the permanent tag on it. That means that basically you can't trade it, you can't drop it, it can't be taken from you. It is stuck to you forever, and if it flips, it is now clogging up a spot in your inventory forever, basically. So considering you only have 5 item slots, it's a pretty huge investment, and it has similarly huge benefits. You know, giving all of your allies secures is pretty insane, considering how much that means that they now are safe to go completely all out. I mean, that's the equivalent of, yeah, like it's the equivalent of overcommitting for free every round for allies on your tile, but you can't hit anything until you find, like, you know, maybe you find some sort of some, yes, that's correct. It will be useful again at the start of the next mission. All items flip between missions, but for the rest of the mission, it's clogging up a spot. You do not count as an ally to yourself. It is explicitly just for your actual allies, not your own person. You cannot see other burns for now. I might at some point, at some later date, show off more of them. What I will say is that they are all similarly powerful. They are all similarly interesting, and they give like really interesting angles for it. And it similarly, there are a few characters that have the ability to flip burn items. It's not a super common thing, but it's very powerful for the ones that can, because it means that they have a lot of synergy with it. And for those that don't, they kind of have to make the deal with the devil of like, do I really want to get a hold of this? I will say Echo with some burn, for reasons that I won't talk about, are not Unity actually. One of the other types of burn would be absolutely insane on Echo, for reasons that you will eventually see. Are they all double-edged swords? They all have what I'd call like conditional drawbacks. There's always something that you have to bear in mind with them in order to make sure that they don't flip and put you in a bit of a rough spot. I will say, like, there's no strict like penalty for any of them. Like, you won't have like a debuff other than having one of your item slots filled. But yeah, they all have that sort of like little quirk trigger thing that means that then it flips. So it adds a little bit of thought to your gameplay. It adds a little bit of thought to the hostiles gameplay as well. Like, is there a way that they could force you to attack or force you into a situation where your burn would flip? Which is another way that the hostile can really fuck with you, which is very fun. I want to read this out because it's genuinely giving me like psychic damage. Imagine being zooted out of your gourd on burn and a spider shows up. I'd simply die on the spot, rip to the operatives, but I'm built different. So it is a words. All operatives start with 5 item slots as their maximum encumbrance. There is a potential that gives you +1 that's available to all operatives, and Pluto the Scrapper starts with a carrying rig, which also buffs his carrying capacity. Yeah, it's kind of, you need to really think about what you want to put in your item slots, when you want to pick something up, when you want to put something down. But you do have like a little bit of extra room. And I guess I want to talk a little bit about that because I think it's interesting to also think about the items that you can pick up along the way. So I'll use an example. So Pluto has been shown off quite a lot. Pluto with the rig and 5 burns. Oh my god. I'm trying to think like how that would operate. That's some devious. I think Pluto would be having a bad time with 5 burns because I don't think all of the burns would be compatible with each other like that. But you know what? Follow your heart. Follow your heart. See what happens. I want to see people doing really quirked up, crazy things with this game. But actually, speaking of Pluto, it's actually a good segue because I wanted to talk a little bit about Pluto's gun. Pluto is starts with a regular pistol, and it's a pretty good weapon. it has 1 black die, and if he takes his full turn, he can make it. Sorry, I keep reading like Antari's shitposting, and it's all so good. I love it. So yeah, Pluto starts with a pistol, and it's a good pistol, but the fact that he has to take an action every round if he wants to secure it, that's a little bit of a downside. But that's what he starts with, right? So that's kind of what he has to deal with. And one of the kind of benefits of going on the consolidation missions, which are the kind of counterpoint to the recruitment missions, is that along the way you might be able to find just upgrades to your gear. So in this case, a revolver that is, instead of it being an action to secure one, it just gets secure one as a passive. And of course, that's a slightly less, it's a white die instead of a black die. So you kind of have to get the trade-off of like, do I want to take this? Do I want to take that? And then of course, there's the old reliable complete side grade that is a very different weapon, but is also very, very effective. So Pluto at some point might be able to find a grinder, which is first of all a firearm that uses primal, which is a bit of an uncommon trait, and also doesn't flip if you botch. It's completely safe to use for botching. And this is kind of the benefit of going on these consolidation missions and upgrading your gear. Yes, correct. So the filled in color ability makes it an active thing. And then hollow ones are passive. So yeah, this is just an example of like the kind of things that you can find by going on the item discovery missions, where you kind of build up one character instead of getting more characters. And you can... I think it's an interesting choice about whether you want to kind of get more guys or you want to really buff the guys that you have, right? And that kind of runs throughout all of the consolidation missions. The consolidation missions get you some really good gear. You just have to kind of balance that with, you know, how much is this worth? Like, do I really, maybe you really like the operatives that you have. You think you have your synergies all set, and you kind of want to look for ways to get them stronger, like more weapons, better armor, new opportunities for their gameplay. I've had a couple of questions come in. Do nanites make an appearance as an item? Can we see some RG gear? No comment. My lawyers will be in touch. Jerome will be speaking to you. Can we expect little metaplot surprises along the unfolding campaign? I don't know, rumors of a marauder doing marauder things or something like that. 100%. I don't want to go into it too much. One of the things that we set out to do for Clan Wars was that we really wanted it to be completely accessible for new people to Degenesis. So really, you don't need tons and tons of lore information to get the gist of what's going on. It's kind of clear. You're being attacked by a horde of cannibal savages. They're gonna kill your entire family if you don't kill them first. Off you go, make it happen. But the more you kind of get into the story and the more you kind of unravel, the more you like kind of understand what's going on along the way, and maybe you spot some things like, oh, here's a little lore tidbit that kind of fits in with something that I saw earlier, and you can kind of piece that all together. I will say that like the mission booklet, I think the preview mission booklet, in fact, does have a few lore. You won't have seen it yet because you only see the first 20 pages, in which case I won't talk too much about it. But a lot of the missions along the way have little like pure lore segments as well to give a little bit of context for what's going on. Both on the level of maybe filling in something about the lore that a lot of people who have been along the way will know, but some people who are coming in might not. Like the watchtower defense line around siege, and others might play into revealing the movements of some factions after the events of an adventure that's happened in the RPG previously. So I won't go into it too much. And I will go back because there was a question that came in that I missed that I really wanted to mention, which was about the heretic. Yes. So the heretic, the tarot card allows you to flip an item. That's beneficial to both because, for example, maybe the hostile really wants to take out this weapon for yada yada yada. Sorry, my thoughts are getting stuck. Maybe the hostile really hates being fired at by this pistol, and so use the heretic to flip it. Or maybe Pluto has botched and flips it, and then uses the heretic to put it back into operation. It was one of the fun ways of going around the tarot. I can show you the disciple, but let me check what the rules text on the version that I have is, because the disciple, yes, we do have it. And I will put up the abomination, because I'm nothing if not a crowd pleaser, and it's what you guys wanted to see. Yeah, so the disciple I found really fun because there's a sort of a corresponding tarot called the Seeker, and the Seeker is a sort of similar effect, but they play out quite differently. Where so the nuance between these is that the Seeker allows you to choose an arcana and then draw it. But the thing is that if that arcana is already in someone's hand, then you actually will simply be unable to draw it because it's already gone from the deck. Oh, the lore nerds are seeing what's going on with the card art. The disciple instead means that you absolutely can't, you cannot fail to get a tarot card, and you still get the option of ending up with something usable, and being able to like draw tarot cards and like decide what ones fit your situation is like a really powerful effect, because you can sort of tailor it to what you actually need at that particular moment. On the heretic, just because we brought up the grinder earlier, I thought I'd mention some interesting interplay, because obviously the grinder cannot botch if you're attacking with it, but that doesn't mean it can't be flipped. And when it's flipped, it will be discarded at the end of the mission, unless you're able to flip it back. And you can do this by, if I remember rightly, Pluto can flip broken items, or there's also toolkits that allow you to flip broken items as well. So this kind of like sets like a ticking clock if you've got this, and for example your steel beam, because you kind of need to, if you need to get this back in operation or you'll lose it completely. So you might be trying to like meet up with an ally somewhere on the board so that they can use a toolkit, or you try and get another scrapper to do it, but if you don't, then it's gone. So someone has asked to see GG, so there you go. I'll do that while I answer. Were you able to touch on balance at all? So what else? I guess there's a couple of questions here. One is about how punishing a botch is for some pieces of equipment over others. It's kind of like a correlation, right? Like there's an angle of if we really want to have like a very powerful item that has a lot of risk associated with it, then it tends to have like quite a tough botch condition. For example, the grinder, it has a very forgiving trait. It's actually a very powerful trait for being used, but then it correlates to having quite a severe botch side if you can kind of like flip it and prevent it from being put back in order as the hostile, then it's completely gone, right? And similarly, a lot of the firearms, a lot of firearms tend to have out of ammo, so basically they can't be flipped back unless you have some specific traits and potentials. So that kind of balances in terms of the fact that you get like a long-ranged attack that can kind of reach out and touch the cockroaches somewhere else on the map. Are we playing Mimetic Juju on you to pledge a dozen copies? I cannot confirm either way, but you should be sure to stare directly into my eyes as I tell you that you should go to the GameFound launch page and back some more. So in terms of other balance in the game, in terms of like power budget and starting balance and so on, I'll say that yeah, we definitely did consider the starting like lineup for each operative is very like tightly designed by Renard. So each operative was specifically designed with certain starting items and potentials in mind. And that kind of means that you're naturally going to have some interesting dynamics right out of the gate. There's always going to be some sort of like thing that you can do or something cool that sort of works with balance. A lot of the sort of later items tend to be quite strong. When we were thinking about balancing that, like we did think about it a lot. I will say considering the number of suggestions in the game, there was absolutely no way that we could test everything. So I'm sure that there might be some sort of crazy mad combos later on in the game that like kind of stack things up. I know that we discovered during early playtesting that if you give Echo a gun, he's really, really strong, which is very cool. I think that overall, we kind of have balanced in the aspect of everyone gets really strong later on in the game. Like all the operatives get really tough, the hostile gets a lot of really powerful abilities that they can use. I've told this story a few times. I did accidentally give the hostile an infinite death loop at the end of the game where they could kind of just run up to an operative and then they're dead. That one has been patched out, but it kind of shows the level that we're operating on later on in the game of both the hostile and the operative gets like a really great ability of kind of playing off against each other. When I was designing the final fight, I really, really wanted to get this angle of the two sides, like they've been battling back and forth for maybe up to like maybe 20 missions total if you've gone for everything. And they've really gone for they've gone through it, they've gone through all of their upgrades, they've acquired both sides, have acquired new abilities, they're really operating at the peak of their game, and now in like final showdown they're gonna like completely bash it out, they're gonna kill each other, no one's gonna be left standing, and that'll be that. I'm gonna look at some questions. What happens if an enemy botches a roll? Do they have gear that breaks down too? That's one of the things. Typically, the hostile doesn't have quite as severe a penalty for botching. It's kind of one of the balances on it. The roll would then just fail. It's not a case of like you don't immediately die if you botch as a cackler. Most of the time. I will say that sometimes when they're doing like mission specific rolls and so on, botches can backfire quite heavily on the hostile. So it's not like they can't be hit with pretty severe consequences. And also sometimes the hostile gets, for example, the warriors all secure one on all their rolls. So securing and trying to make those effects stack up is definitely like still on the table for the hostile. Yeah, the discussion on the app is ongoing in chat. I'll kind of relay it for people who are watching back. But yeah, we did think about an app early on in terms of like we were trying to weigh up a lot of like how do we want to go about running the hostile, and it ended up at the point of we don't have the development experience for an app. It would require like a completely different skill set. And on top of that, it also really wouldn't hit the kind of feeling that we wanted to get out of the hostile because I don't know, having someone who's actually sitting here behind a screen plotting all of the things that are going on, I feel like it would be kind of underwhelmed if you replaced me with just like a phone sitting here that's telling me when you die and so on. But yeah. Random question. I enjoy the black and white, but is there a color image in the books of the characters for painting references and such? A lot of the characters have appeared in art before, so there's a lot of options in the books where you can. The art style for Clan Wars is very much like distilled down. It's very clean. It's very streamlined. But throughout, you'll be able to. Oh, Erwan's here. Hey, how's it going? Erwan worked with us a long time ago. It was super great. So yeah, there's references in the books that you'll be able to look up and get them. So you should have no particular trouble for painting references, but also feel free to go follow your heart, work out what's going on. Can players create their own scenarios or one-off missions? First of all, I'll say I am super, super, super excited for people to get their hands on this game because there are going to be so many options for people to just kind of make their own custom stuff, like regardless of what I actually end up doing. There are so many maps, like combinations. I did a rough estimate early on for how many maps you could create. So there are 2 themes in the game. So we have each map is double-sided. So there is. Am I out of frame? I'll put them on our little focus. So theme 1. This is sort of close to home for the Protectorate. So this is kind of like dried up tundra. We have like dried riverbeds. We have impact craters. This is kind of like the home front. And then as the operatives progress further out into the wasteland, they go into this much more like rocky basalt type terrain that has like gone beyond what is known. This is like uncharted territory. So each theme has 14 sectors. So that's 28 in total with both sides. And in terms of like the combinations, like 14 on each side, 2 sides, they can both be connected in a bunch of different ways. I did a rough estimate that there are about 10,000 possible maps. I'll say that when we put that on our page, there's a big asterisk next to it, and after that it says "we think," because statistics is the enemy, and I will not tolerate it in my presence for very long. I just did it was like a binomial type thing. I put some numbers together, and it got to about 10,000. So we've barely scratched the surface of the maps that you can create for missions. And that was with some like limitations on what we could do. So in my dev diary, I kind of joked about Marco not liking the maps if they're not on a very specific aspect ratio. That was true. That was actually a thing that happened. But also, look, if you make 10,000 missions, I will be so happy. As much as I joked about it being the aspect ratio, it actually was that we really wanted to make sure that the game could all fit on like an actual table. So every mission fits on a 90 by 60 centimeter grid, which is like a fairly, it's a little under a meter one direction and a little over half a meter the other way. So it should be like fairly doable to fit it on most tables, and that was like a big thing for us to hit. But of course, strictly speaking, there's nothing stopping you from using all 14 maps on one giant board and having some sort of absolutely monstrous free-for-all on some like proper wargaming table or something like that, which would be super cool. And we did think about doing it as like a big showcase, but I think it would kind of stretch the limit of what we could actually film. So that might be something that we have to leave up to someone else. So map wise, there's tons of options. I really think that once people get a hold of the mission booklet, it's going to be very easy for people to just kind of take what's there, rip it out, and reshuffle it around. Because all of the missions are very much they have a very like defined structure to them, and I'll take you through one of the missions just to kind of go over what the structure is, because it's kind of nice to go through everything and run it through. So I believe this all shows up fine on stream. Am I a little bit perfect? Awesome. I kind of have to wait for stream delay to pick up before I can look at things. So each mission has like very defined parts. I'm about to be readjusted by the expert. Okay, perfect. So it starts with basically a information section that is for the hostile's eyes. And this gives the hostile a little bit of detail about what's going on. It gives them some information from their perspective, so it lets the hostile be like, oh, this is what my guys are up to, this is who is fighting on my side, and it gives them a little bit of that extra context. It also shows the location. So each mission is located at a corresponding point on the situation map. So what we can see is that First Blood is located exactly at here. It took me a little while to work it out because I have to look at it upside down. Yeah, basically the operatives now get the option to be like, okay, we started here, and then we moved here, and then we moved like all the way back around here, and then we're going way out into whatever's beyond there. And that lets the operatives kind of keep track of what's going on, where they are. It gives them some context, and it's pretty cool for just being able to see like their progress on the map. Then we get into the briefing. So this is what is actually read to the operatives. This is the war council in siege, the ones kind of coordinating the war, really pushing and telling them their orders. And then we get into the intel phase. So this is like a huge part of the game as we go forward. So I'm going to kind of break it down and talk for a little while about how we came to the development of this. So each piece of intel has a context and an effect. And we went through a lot of iterations on this to try and kind of work out how we wanted the system to run. And what we really wanted to do was give... is there a mission taking us back to N17? No comment. Stay tuned. What we really wanted to do was give the operatives a kind of way of bartering with the hostile and influencing the mission to come and working out really what operatives they need to bring in. The big thing that we wanted to bring through with this is like giving you a bit of a key, a bit of a clue about what operatives are best suited for this mission. So for example, to just, the one here is pretty obvious, right? It's very much okay, you're going to need to bring a scrapper along for this mission because otherwise you won't be able to get whatever is hidden in the wall. And at that point, you're like, okay, we clearly need to bring Pluto along for this mission. And later on, there are some like that where it's very much like you need to bring a judge, you need to bring a Helvetic, etc. But also there are some that are a little bit more like, maybe this mission is best suited for an operative that can get up close and personal. Maybe we've got some intel that we're about to get ambushed, so we probably shouldn't bring our sniper Decoy 5 because otherwise he's about to get murked in the first turn and be out of action. So it's kind of like giving a little bit of a hint as to what's about to happen, and that lets the operatives be like, this is how we're going to play this ahead of time. And then also we wanted it to be a way to get the Arcana into the hostile's hand, and also gameplay bonuses that are very like thematically tied to the mission into the operatives. And the operatives get to, maybe you shouldn't bring the Jahamedan. I mean, if you want them to survive, that's probably for the best. The operatives get this choice of they understand the context of this intel. They have a little bit of insight into what's going on, and they're like, well, this has a gameplay bonus associated with it. Do we think this is worth for us buying? And they might, be like, well, this said that we should probably bring a chronicler in. We've decided this means that we should probably bring a chronicler in because there's some ruined technology that's been pointed out to us in the intel phase. But Echo died 2 missions ago because we left him too exposed. Probably we shouldn't handle shouldn't barter for this one and give the hostile an Arcana for nothing. And that's a way to kind of reward the players who are paying attention and understanding what's going on, while also having this, like, there is just an angle of, like, it's fun to kind of get gameplay benefits in exchange for giving the hostile something else. So, yeah, the intel phase proceeds. For example, some operatives also can use this phase as a way to get free intel. Echo, obviously, with his huge information gathering effects, he can just pick one of these intel and just take it, and it doesn't give the hostile the Arcana. And then this area is kind of for the end game. We put it here because it means that the objectives get to be read out before the game starts, and then the consequences get to be read out at the end. Once the operatives have all of their objectives, they understand how the mission ends, you can then go to sort of the main gameplay page, and this is kind of what the hostile has open when they're actually playing, and this contains the information on things like special effects, what units the hostile actually has access to, and the map setup that they have available. So yeah, this gives you the setup for the map. So you would lay out the tiles in the right pattern. You would set up your threats. The operatives would be put in the spawn. And one of the ways that the game kind of rewards replayability and kind of thinking about things is that these threats are not completely specific. The way that they work is that the hostile chooses what kind of the rank of unit is specified. So for example, each of these S markers must be one of the swarmers that the hostile has access to. But you get to decide which one it is. So for example, you've probably all seen M1 at this point. I don't really think, this is one of the informations that can be probably revealed. They might decide that they want to try and make a run for the exit to reinforce their units later. So they might put their mauler here and kind of commit to just making an absolute beeline across the map. Or they might be trying to go more for their secondary or their primary objective of dealing trauma to the operatives. And they're like, okay, I'm going to put my stinger here because my stinger can attack while it's still a threat. And that means that I can kind of creep up to the operatives and start taking shots at them while they can't take shots at me. And similarly, this goes on as the game gets a little bit more complex, and there's more options and more opportunities, and I won't show the next mission yet because that's something that is going to be shown off maybe in some videos in the future. So the reason that I kind of went all into that was this format is kept very consistent throughout the entire book. All missions are exactly 4 pages long. They all have the same pattern. They all have the same format. And that means that when it comes time for you guys to make your own missions, if you want, you have everything laid out for you in terms of just this is how it works and this is where everything goes. And you have plenty of examples that you can just skim through and you can be like, oh, in mission 12, there's this really cool unique effect with some tunnels under the map. I want that for my game, so I'm going to take that little section and I'm just going to paste it in here. So that I really think is going to be like a really fun thing for people to come up with when it comes time to make their own missions. I have to say, like, I'm so excited for people to make their own fan content. It's something that I really want to try and support as the game goes out. My way into Degenesis was by making fan content. You know, Erwan was here, he was around for it. I helped him write a fan book, and that was kind of my big introduction to the community. So as kind of like honoring that as my origin, I really want to try and help you guys make some of your own stuff. But I'm very excited for the mission booklet. I think the format is very helpful because the more you get into it, the more you kind of intuitively understand like what's going on. You know, like where everything is. You don't have to like flip around too much to look for it. So that was me kind of yapping on for like a bunch of time about custom missions. I noticed a few. First off, a comparison to, I think it's called Others or Seven Sins. Let me see. Are you able to share some info on future expansions? I'm afraid that there is not much that I can say because it's very much a Simon thing. And Simon's handling the campaign, while us at Six More Vodka are the ones who kind of developed and run the game. What I can say is that there are 2 gameplay expansions that you get with the Apocalypse Pledge, and pretty much that's all I can say about them for now. You'll find out more about them next week, or at least one of them. I guess what I can say is that I'm extremely excited to talk more about them, and it's killing me that I can't. I'm super fired up about the first one to come out. Let's see. We just do stuff. Yeah, I will say for everyone who is here and watching, or who's going to watch this later, enormous credit goes to Renard de Maupertuis, or Maupertuis, or I can't pronounce French names. I'm sorry. He is the guy behind all of the mechanics for the game. I kind of just stuck it all together in some sort of haphazard abomination of a hodgepodge that ended up kind of ending up as a campaign. Renard really put together all of the base for the game. He really put all of the things together in such a really smooth and elegant way. It made my job so much easier because I really just had to kind of put things together like Lego, right? Like I just put things in. I was like, I want this effect for a mission and this effect and this enemy, and then it all just kind of worked out. So huge credit goes to Renard. He's the one who put together everything that I've talked about today. He deserves all the credit for it, and I just wrote it all into a campaign. We're kind of coming up on about 2 hours, and I think I kind of want to start winding up. So I will ask the crowd if there is any more last-minute questions that they want, if there's any clarifications I can go in for, if there's any things that I can unravel, because I've been having a good time. I hope you've been having a good time, and I want to end on a high note. I'm fully just yapping a little bit because there's a bit of a delay between what I say, what you see, and then what you type in chat. So I just want to keep this like a nice smooth. I don't want to kind of just stare in silence. Yeah, I really miss Renard. Unfortunately, he was too busy to join us, but we're all super happy that he managed to make it into chat. So that's a big win. And yeah, while I'm here, so only 2 expansions in the Apocalypse edition. There are 2 gameplay expansions in the Apocalypse edition. There are also the 2 sort of stretch goal expansions that are being added to every pledge. So that's the Operative expansion, which contains, for example, Decoy, Fallberg, and Steelbeam, the operatives that have been revealed in the daily unlock so far, and the Terrain expansion, which contains the 3D sculpted terrain items, 2 of which here have been revealed so far. And then there are some more kicking around that you'll have seen in some videos and so on that are very cool. The core box comes with like the concept art standee version of these, which are, you know, really cool. But having them like physically there on the board, I think, is a really nice extra touch. The sculpts on them are super good. The designs on them are super good. And I like to think the effects in game are super good because I came up with those. So if they're broken, unfortunately, that's on me. Is it possible to execute a wounded operative with the destroyer? Absolutely. The destroyer is very much kind of like a simple effect that's very powerful. Just to find it. It would be very frustrating from the player's perspective, but the thing is that also they get the chance to hold it. One of the operatives will be able to draw this as just their concept card, so they get it at the start of every mission. In fact, Schweitzer is the one, the Anabaptist is the one who gets that. So at the beginning of every mission, he just kind of throws that out. Largest miniature I have to show on stream. I don't have a lot of them to hand just because I have what I have here that was in our preview kit. What I'll say is that you can go to the campaign page and it shows off all of the. We have the renders of a lot of them with the associated heights. I think the biggest miniature, I think Mir is 75 millimeters tall. He's pretty huge. And then I think a lot of the big boys are like 50 to 60 millimeters tall. They are pretty enormous and very cool. So yeah, I just don't have the models right to hand, and it would be a little bit of a hassle to get them. But there's definitely like photography of a lot of them on the page as well. All of our minis have been like printed and prototyped and so on. So if you scroll down right to the bottom of the campaign page, you ought to be able to see them with like actual close-up photography, so you can see some of the details. I will say, I mean, I'm not much of like a miniature board games guy, but like some of the sculpts that have been managed to put together are very impressive. You know, I'll show off some of the. Is that focusing?
If you want to show, I'll show.
Oh, we're gonna show off. Yeah. Let's go for it. We're gonna do a little bit of a mini showcase for you guys. I'll give a couple over. We can show off some of the details. And that'll be a fun way to finish up the stream, I think.
No, focus doesn't work.
Is it not focusing super well?
Thank you. I need your help.
Good question. Will there be any Fog of War gameplay? Are we working?
Yep, it is working.
Awesome. Will there be any Fog of War gameplay with the tiles? Like the tiles will not be placed until players reach the edge of the current one. What I'll say is that's not something that I've used within the game as the campaign is set up. The field is kind of like very set up. I think you probably could do something like that. There's an angle of like doing randomized tiles becomes a little bit messy with with the way that they're like set up and oriented and so on. But I fully believe that you guys will be able to do some cool things with that. It just wasn't really something that we wanted to work on. I will say there are some effects that remove tiles from the map. So keep an eye out for some of those later on in the game. Yeah, so next stream, keep an eye out for Ricardo and Marco. They're going to go on an art stream on Monday. They're just going to hang out and chat and talk art. So if you have any big questions about the artwork of Degenesis, keep an eye out for that one. Go along, tell them I said hi. It'll be a very good time, very chill. Ricardo and Marco are lovely folk. And of course, if there is any other questions that you would really like to have answered, feel free to pop up in our Discord, in our Game Found, wherever you like. I'll try my best to answer whatever. And with that, I think I'm probably going to wrap things up around about here. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me. Thank you so much for hanging around while I yap for approximately 2 hours. I'm super excited to be with Clan Wars. I'm super excited that the campaign is chugging along, and I look forward to chatting with you guys again soon enough. Ciao, and I will wait, and it will hopefully turn off. Okay.